In 1996, Capcom released Resident Evil, a game that named and defined the survival horror genre. With a focus on evasion, resource management, and puzzle solving, the PS1 game laid on the suspenseful atmosphere thick, no doubt to its evocative sound effects and chilling music. When it came to the 1998 Director's Cut DualShock Edition, the game's soundtrack was completely overhauled, featuring a brand new score composed by a man known as Japan's Beethoven, Mamoru Samuragochi. Born in 1963 as the son of Hiroshima atomic fallout survivors, Mamoru started playing piano at the age of 4, and by the time he was 10, he could play the works of Bach and Beethoven. Unfortunately, by the time he was 35, his hearing was completely lost. However, this didn't stop him from following his passion for music, and he taught himself to compose, where his piece, Symphony No. 1 Hiroshima, went on to become a smash classical hit in Japan in 2013. Rewinding to 1998, Mamoru was tasked with completely redoing the music for Resident Evil from scratch. He had big boots to fill. Let's have a listen at his improved soundtrack, shall we? Yikes. So yeah, Mamoru royally f***ed that one up, but plot twist, hun. He was never actually deaf. He did an interview where he answered questions before his sign language interpreter had finished signing, and when a doorbell went off, he got up to go and answer the door, but plot twist again. Turns out none of that even mattered because he didn't write it anyway. Turns out all of his music since 1996 had been ghostwritten by Takashi Nagaki, a part-time lecturer who went to the press about the whole thing when one of Mamoru's pieces was going to be used during the 2014 Winter Olympics. Personally, I just love that it got that far and that the zombie flatulence sound effects didn't give it away. I do think that it makes a good point though, that music in games plays a really big role. Music can set a certain mood in the game, where it can be slow and whimsical when it wants to evoke a sense of wonder, and upbeat and fast-paced when you really need to hurry the f*** up, but running out of time, you need to get all those spanners. And when combined effectively with periods of silence, music can send chills down your spine, or alert you to a threat that's about to get you from behind. Music often plays a role in the actual game itself, being deeply integrated into the gameplay or the aesthetics of a level. But let's not forget that not only does music have a profound impact on video games, but the gaming world also had a major influence on music itself, all the way from the use of samples and songs inspired by video game soundtracks, to the technology of gaming itself being utilized by artists to promote their work. Take it away, maestro.
I have to warn you, I'm good at this one.
Start it up. 3, 2, 1, go!
Much like graphical capabilities, music has come a long way since the beginning of video games. To briefly touch on the technology, and I should probably let you know that I am no technology expert, computers originally only had simple audio devices that could produce basic bleeps and bloops, but as everything had to be processed by the CPU, audio was a computational heavy load. Early home consoles started having dedicated audio chips capable of producing a small number of individual voices, usually limited to set audio types like square waves, triangle waves, sawtooth, and noise. Later on, PCM sampling became the norm, leading to the classic over-the-top 80s orchestra hit-filled bangers we know and love. There's a great video by the 8-Bit Guy that you should definitely check out. It goes into just a little bit more detail. However, with the eventual transition to optical media and an increase in computing capability, the amount of storage for games was vastly increased, allowing for full CD quality music to be played seamlessly without affecting gameplay. This fully unlocked the creativity of video game music composers. Fantasy games could finally get the fully orchestrated scores they deserved, and licensed games like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings could inject a real cinematic feeling now their proper soundtracks were available to be used without compromise. Sometimes popular musicians would even be called upon to compose for games, such as Nine Inch Nails' Trent Reznor composing music for Quake, and Stuart Copeland of The Police creating music for the original Spyro the Dragon games.
You might not interrupting me when I'm working.
There's a great official PlayStation magazine interview with Stuart when he was making the music for the first Spyro, and this one quote from him has stuck with me so much about how joyous and satisfying making music can be.
Somebody once asked Stravinsky, what's the great moment of being a composer? Is it when the audience lights up into your music, or is it the reviews? He said, no. The best moment is when you find that note you're looking for and you get that chord which leads to that chord, and you've got this under thing happening there which pays off right here, at the same time set it and you crack it and you've got it, it goes there and it does it. That's it. And it's downhill from there.
Although consoles generally moved beyond the requirement to use samples, sampling is still common in music both in and out of the video game world. In fact, a lot of Spyro 2's most recognizable beats and sound effects came from this sample pack, Distorted Reality 2, by Eric Persing and released by Spectrasonics. Common genres explored by 90s and noughties games included electronic and dance music. While techno, house, and drum and bass became prominent in clubs in the 80s and 90s, they started to seep throughout the gaming sphere, popping up all over the place. From games you'd expect, like racing games and action and shooting games, to platformers like Crash Bandicoot, and zombie survival horrors such as Parasite Eve and Resident Evil. PS1 demo discs were especially notable for their use of electronic music that inexplicably went f***ing hard. I will say that a lot of music in modern games just doesn't quite hit the same for me. Feels more incidental than providing that punch that 90s and noughties game soundtracks did. Well, of course, I'm sure it's just my nostalgia brain speaking. Not only does music provide a backing track to whatever frivolities are occurring on screen, but there is often a level of interaction or influence on the game itself, ranging from surface level aesthetic features to being embedded deeply in the gameplay itself. Musical themed levels show up every now and then, and while I wouldn't say music as a theme is as prevalent as the likes of ice or underwater or deserts, it's still definitely popular in platform and adventure games. One of the more vicious examples is Bandland in the first Rayman game, where musical notes are really sharp and can shoot lightning bolts out of their straining bloodshot eyes. And of course, let us not forget the carnivorous piano in Super Mario 64. In other games, the interaction between game and music is even more subtle. Dynamic soundtracks are a popular method of matching the music with the action, or lack thereof, the Spyro Reignited trilogy being a great example of the new composers taking a pre-existing soundtrack and changing it slightly. Mamoru take king note. I also love when the game itself has bits that follow the music, like the Goombas jumping and Koopa's jazz handsing in time to the ha-has. Of course, so many games have had much more actual interaction with music. Games that have allowed for the creation of music have been around since near the beginning of gaming. And a bit of a side note, but one of my absolute favorite things to do was make music using the Sony Ericsson phone music maker thing. I'm sure everything I made absolutely slapped. Besides actually making music though, music has featured in all sorts of games as a core gameplay mechanic. Playing musical instruments in-game is a common puzzle element. Wii Music was honestly one of my favourite music-themed Wii games, although in hindsight it's not the best. The DS had a couple of campy rhythm-based games, such as Elite Beat Agent, and a personal favourite of mine, Rhythm Heaven or Rhythm Paradise. The DS does feel like the perfect platform for rhythm games due to the touchscreen, allowing for different interactions, such as tapping, holding, swiping. Okay, I guess that's it really, but... And of course, music games were also a great opportunity for capitalist fat cats to make even more money through peripherals. A plethora
era of panettone.
Of interactive music games came out during the PS2 era, ranging in quality from Guitar Hero, where the chunky plastic electric guitar, I would argue, was actually decent, with 5 buttons, and I'm not a musician, but you know, that bit that you like strum or wiggle or whatever at the bottom, somewhat faithfully recreating the experience of actually being a rock star. And custom Guitar Hero songs are still being made today. The scene is actually pretty big. I remember seeing a video not that long ago, like a couple of years ago, with someone like faking how good they were. Like, we're talking that level of like people still playing. Another series was SingStar, which was basically just karaoke mixed with the game rating your ability by how many strangled cats out of 10 you sounded like. It's the final countdown! And not f***ing joking, but why the f*** did I get High School Musical SingStar when I was young? That was definitely where I got my gay awakening from. Dance Dance Revolution, or as I just called it, Dance Mat, was another great moneymaker for the companies, where a pathetically flimsy dance mat was supplied, desperately trying to replicate the arcade DDR experience. Even Nintendo had a good go at the peripheral business with Donkey Konga, and this more recent Switch game, Taiko no Tatsujin, with extra lovely bits of plastic that you can drum to your heart's content with. I never had Donkey Konga. I remember trying out a demo in Toys R Us, and wow, I am still envious to this day of all the people who had Donkey Konga when they were young. Also, making this video, I discovered that there was a fucking Super Mario themed DDR. Like, what the actual Gaming and the surrounding culture have also found their way into the world of popular music, and not just in the ways you would expect. The past 30 years or so have seen musicians and producers who have grown up playing video games, and this is often reflected in the music that they make. Rappers are not shy at dropping in comparisons to video game characters or franchises, and they often reference specifics in wider video game culture. Biggie really hits the nail on the head by suggesting that having 2 consoles is a real sign of wealth.
Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When I was dead broke, man, I couldn't picture this.
And Lloyd Banks compares having to blow into old SNES cartridges to get them working to,
As this shit ain't gonna never pop like 10 gold chains. That's why your bitch blowing on me like Nintendo games.
Well, I think you get the idea. Pop, hip-hop, and dance music, including samples from game sound effects, or even taking bits of music, is almost as old as the medium of video games itself.
Still ain't living.
One great example of sampling video game audio is Burial, the often elusive electronic musician who has snuck samples of Metal Gear Solid all over his 2007 album Untrue. The main theme is heavily used in the track Archangel. And he states, "A lot of my drums are just people picking up new ammo and weapons in games, and indeed, in Distant Light, you can hear bullet shells hitting the floor." The link between Japan and video game music is undeniable, with so many games, consoles, and companies being Japanese. J-pop is another genre that has both influenced and been influenced by video games. One of my favourite albums from 2021 was Kieri Pamu Pamu's Candy Racer, and covers all sorts of genres from house to city pop. The evocatively named title track, Candy Racer, is an absolute Mario Kart sugar rush of a track.
Candy Racer.
And sounds heavily inspired by the track Cairo Dome from Wipeout on the PS1. Hikaru Utada, one of the best-selling Japanese pop artists of all time, has released 4 songs for the Kingdom Hearts series of games, including Face My Fears from Kingdom Hearts 3, co-produced with Skrillex and Pooh Bear. Their most recent album, Bad Mode, one of my favourites of 2022, also features co-production from PC Music record label boss A.G. Cook. The influence of video games on modern music is especially prevalent in the work of PC Music and their collaborators. Kero Kero Benito's 2014 song Sick Beat heavily samples Super Mario 64, and lyrics including references to Tomb Raider, Windows 98, and the absolutely amazing chorus.
Whichever console you play, no matter how many hours a day, I could win at any game with a real boy or a girl or a supercomputer.
More recently, they've also released a song, It's Bugsnax, for the 2020, I think, game Bugsnax, which I wouldn't say was the best-selling game of all time. Really shot themselves in the foot by making it an Epic Game Store exclusive, but the song absolutely f***ing slaps and I won't hear a single word against it. They've also had songs featured in the more recent FIFA releases, both as KKB, and also in Sarah Benito's side project Cry A Lot with Jennifer Walton. Nice Resi 2 t-shirt. Another great example of video games seeping into music is the mixtape Unlimited Ammo by Nama Sender. She describes the concept as being heavily inspired by action films such as Die Hard, although I think the many links to video games littered throughout are undeniable. The opening track, Black Ops 2, is an obvious reference to the Call of Duty game, with the chorus repeating, Finish Him is obviously a reference to Mortal Kombat, and the name of the title track itself alludes to FPS games where cheats or mods could enable an unlimited ammo supply. Even the absolutely iconic cover itself shows Namasenda pointing a giant smoking gun towards us, referencing the gun pointing at the screen meme as much as it is action films and games. Meme culture is also used a lot by Dorian Electra and is reflected in the deluxe edition of the album My Agenda, where a doctored Xbox 360 game case features as the cover art. In this album, they poke fun at toxic masculinity and edgy gamer culture through a queer lens. The use of video game references is not a coincidence, I think, and actually works twofold for the record label. Yes, it's daytime now, whatever. One, PC music, by its name, sits comfortably within the range of electronic music, and so leaning into video games only reinforces this digital aesthetic. It also suggests escaping into another realm, where its music often builds whole worlds you can just slip into. Hell, Spotify keeps making me playlists called Escape Room, which is just filled with PC music and hyperpop, but also, two, video games are inherently physical, often being interacted with a controller or a touchscreen. This grounding into the real world, I think, helps bridge the weirdness and otherworldliness of PC music into reality, where its artists are very much real individuals, simply working on their craft and pouring their emotions into each piece of music. Throughout and beyond the lockdowns we experienced due to COVID-19, musicians that would ordinarily be releasing music and touring across the world have had to find other ways of playing music, and many turned to performing on the virtual stage. The most popular and obvious route was live streams, ranging from high-budget professional shows all the way to messy, glitchy, but extremely authentic Zoom meetings. However, multiplayer online video games became another popular platform, which does kind of make perfect sense. Your audience is right there dancing in front of you, and often able to chat to each other at the same time. Fortnite proved to be the most significant, with shows from Ariana Grande and Travis Scott, and Roblox coming in a close second with Lil Nas X, Charlie XCX, and Ava Max giving performances. Minecraft was another popular platform, especially for showcase events with multiple performers, and was the platform seemingly favoured by the PC music and hyperpop scene. PC Music's Hannah Diamond, known for her glossy fashion photoshoot aesthetic, even embraced ImView, an online virtual world created all the way back in 2004. Virtual spaces have also been utilised by more club-centric artists. Danny L. Hall, a former PC Music member, is known for his happy hardcore and 90s rave-inspired club nights called Hallcore. However, to celebrate the release of his 2021 album of the same name, he created a virtual mega club with 4 rooms, each with their own DJ and genre, transmitting music 24/7. Danny's musical taste was as much informed by playing video games as it was by his classical music studies, and he has great insight into the way the limitations of video games at the time would change the way musicians might approach making music. What we're currently experiencing is a false nostalgia for the 90s. Our generation had the luxury of growing up with sounds that were failing to imitate real life, like a MIDI flute, whereas the younger generation have never heard shit sounds. We had this slightly more distorted reality presented to us. You're now going to have people imitating 8-bit sounds, but it's not going to sound quite the same. It's going to sound more modern. Recently, I've also noticed a resurgence of 90s and noughties video game inspired drum and bass and IDM, no doubt to the help of YouTube channels such as 4am Breaks, pushing forward the music of Bandcamp producers and artists. One of my favourite electronic albums of the past few years has been Level Select by Pizza Hotline. I think I'm wearing one of his t-shirts now, actually. Ta-da! His music perfectly crystallizes that noughties PS2 GameCube vibe, with many samples like the PS2 menu. It's club-ready music that pays homage to those underwater and winter levels that kept you up to 2 AM with the volume down low to not wake up mum and dad. Shh! This resurgence feels like the perfect example of music influencing video games, re-influencing music back again. I wanted to round off this video by talking about one of the 21st century's most intriguing artists, Arca.
I do what I wanna do when I wanna do it.
Arca is a Venezuelan musician, producer, and performance artist whose work can be most loosely described as experimental, but covers all genres from pop, IDM, and reggaeton, but you can safely assume that the beats will be thoroughly blitzed up and stuck back together again with bitumen and molasses. What I find really intriguing is her relationship to gaming. Her work often deals with identity and post-humanism, potentially stemming from her lifelong love of video games. She has complex thoughts on video game mechanics, what it means to be productive, and using games as an escape. There's an assumption that a person who spends a lot of time gaming is somehow disappointed by the real world. Who isn't disappointed by the real world? Games and music and art and sports, those are the kind of things that we do for their own sake, without expecting any kind of result. Nothing needs to come from it, other than that moment where you lose your sense of circumstance. I love that her interest in video games and music have had the opportunity to collide. She has worked on music for games such as Red Dead Redemption 2 and Grand Theft Auto Online, where her and Spanish artist Rosalía have collaborated on the in-game radio station Motomami Los Santos. She has also composed the boot up musical cue for Analog's new Mega SG, a remake of the popular Sega Genesis console, giving it the warm but prickly sound I've come to expect from her. And talking on the influence of games on her music, I would say games influence my creations as much as other music I've listened to. There are entire worlds that are built within video games, and I've always found that really inspiring. When it comes to musicianship, or the world that a musician builds in sound, I don't feel like it's much different from creating a speculative fictional world within literature or gaming.
Ooh. This song's a banger. I'm putting it up. Everyone get ready, the volume is going up. This is cool. Love it.